yes or no, but I do need to know something, because if the answer is no, I need to get somebody else. Never heard back. So I was kind of in limbo. So I shoot a message off to Mark and to Carrie. I'm like, you just need to know, we may need to have an alternative plan here. So we came up with an idea for a video we might show if the speaker didn't show. And I honestly didn't know whether they were going to be here tonight or not. Yeah, I'm not looking for your sympathy, Bill. So our speaker didn't show. And lo and behold, proving that there really is a just God, who walks through the door tonight? Steve Stemler, state representative. I approached him, explained to him my situation. I don't think I have to put a pathetic face on. I kind of naturally wear that anyways, but I did my best. Kind of explained the situation. I'm like, Steve, could you give us 10 or 15 minutes? And like a great public servant, he's whatever you need. So, I wish I could take great credit for having, many of you have complimented me this year for the great speakers we've had. I can take absolutely no credit for this one. If you look up dumb luck tonight when you get home, you're probably going to see my picture. So, without any further ado, I give your state representative, Steve.
Well, that's first as far as an introduction, I can tell you that. But, can you hear me okay? Sometimes my height, you're not able to hear me too well. But I'm glad to be able to do this. I did speak today at noon, and I know there's one person, at least in attendance, that was at the luncheon that I was at today and had heard some comments that I'm going to make.
I'll check the notes.
Yeah, see if I'm consistent. I may get off a little bit. But they gave me, I think, 20 minutes, and I went, 40? So you've given me 10, and I'll try to keep it to 10. But let me just talk a little. What I'd like to just do is just share a little bit with you, kind of briefly, and I'll try to condense it the best I can. And if you have any questions, if you're interested, I'll be more than glad to try to answer any questions that you might have. But let me just share a little bit, abbreviated discussion of what I shared today at lunch, and that is kind of where we've been in the past with our state government, where we are currently, and then kind of looking to the future, where we're going to go in the future with our state government, which is a question mark at this point. But let me start, first of all, by saying that there's no question about it. The past 8 years, we had a very aggressive governor, Governor Mitch Daniels, a very direct, driven individual that had an aggressive agenda, assembled team members around him that wanted to accomplish a lot of big issues and take on multiple issues all at once. And at the time, there was divided government, and what I mean by that is you had the Senate was controlled by one party, the Republican Party, and you had the House of Representatives controlled by another party, the Democrats. And so you had divided government, which, as I said today at lunch, I think is in our best interest as a state and, frankly, as a country. I think one party in control is not good. I think we need to have divided government. As much as we get aggravated with the discourse and division, divide the two parties sometimes, that's a healthy process for our democracy and being able to have the checks and balances. So, having looked in the past at where we've come from or where we were, there were 8 years of 6 years divided government, a lot of rancor, a lot of divisive issues. You remember a lot of labor issues was very prominent. Education reform has been and is continuing to be a big issue. Budget issues with money is always a difficult issue. And so that naturally, and then you had some personalities. The majority leader at the time in the House, in fact, he had been down here and spoke before, was Pat Bauer from South Bend. He was the Democrat leader in the House, and his style of governing and leading was kind of pretty aggressive as well. So you had the administration of Governor Daniels, pretty strong personality, and then you had the majority leader at the time, and they had a lot of conflict, and it set up for a pretty divisive 4 to 6 years. So we managed to work through that. There was a lot of discourse, a lot of bitter issues that developed. I mentioned the two big ones that really dominated the scene early on was the labor and the right to work issues, education, but you always have some that are always there every year, and that's the gambling issues. Bob and I were talking about alcohol issues. Those things are always contentious and can be difficult to deal with. There was a redistricting that was in the mix of all this from the census that was taken every 10 years, and so when you get into redistricting, that becomes very political and divisive as well. And then just not too long ago, with the tragedy up in Connecticut, with the shooting, there was a big debate, emotional debate that has happened about guns in school. What's the proper course that should be taken as far as public policy, and what's that role, and how do you protect it? And we can talk a little bit more about that. But then an odd thing happened, a good thing, I think, happened around 2010, 2012. If you remember the elections, there was a movement of with the Tea Party individuals, and there was a number of Tea Party people that were elected, bringing in their own thoughts and ideas into the mix. And that was 10, and then of course 2012 continued on somewhat to a lesser degree. And what we have now is at least in the House of Representatives, we have 31 members out of the 100 that have less than 2 years experience. So what that tells you, you almost have a third of your House of Representatives with very little experience, and whether you're for term limits or not, a number of people that have had a lot of institutional knowledge of the system and how it works and the procedures are no longer there, and so there's a big turnover that's taking place. And then on top of that, you put a new administration with Governor Pence now in charge, and his whole new administration. And some of that's normal. You have a normal cycle that you go through. But the results of that then also ushered in a new leader in the House of Representatives, and that's Brian Bosman, the Republican majority, elected him as the Speaker of the House, replacing Pat Bauer, the Democrat leader. The Senate is Republican, and of course the governor's office is Republican. And whichever party it is, again, my position is I don't think that's healthy to have one party in total control. I think you need, again, the checks and balances that the two-party system allows. But the Democrats also put in change, as I mentioned, with a new leader, because they recognized, as did everybody, and said we need to just kind of step back from the divisiveness that we've had. The rancor, people don't like it. It's not enjoyable to serve that way. And so there was an agreement that this kind of dialed the tone and the rhetoric down. Let's make some changes. And so Pat Bauer was replaced as the Speaker, or as the minority leader, with Scott Pilaf from Michigan City, Indiana. He's a younger individual, and has really made an effort to work with the new leader of the House, the Speaker, and with all the new members that are there, that's really had a big influence. So things seem to be working somewhat better. There's always going to be those differences, and that's the way I guess it should be. So that's kind of where we've been in the past, kind of how we're transitioning now to where we are. We still have a sluggish economy in Indiana. It's gotten better, but it still could be even better. I mentioned the new governor. There's a supermajority with one party. And so what many issues come down to, frankly, and it's no secret, it comes down to money. You know, what are you going to fund with the resources you have? And I was fortunate enough to serve on the budget committee, the Ways and Means Committee, where the budget originates. And your state budget for Indiana is $30 billion. That's $30 billion for 2 years. Roughly 60% of that is for education, public education. So a lot of money goes to public education. Therefore, it demands a lot of attention and a lot of accountability and questions through the process. Now, when we have a surplus, which we have had in Indiana, which has been rare, then people want to spend that extra surplus money. Some do, some don't. And so then you have this dialogue and this discussion, and it's philosophical about what amount should we keep, if any. Some don't think you should have any reserve in your state government. I'm more on the conservative side and want to keep what they tend, analysts tell us this is a good number, probably about $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion in reserves. But you have some that want to give tax credits, and who's not for a tax credit, a reduction? Well, we all are. We would like that, but folks, we've had some real issues that we've neglected through different administrations. And for example, I spoke today at lunch about it, was our aging infrastructure of roads and bridges have been neglected for a number of years. Our water distribution system throughout Indiana, again, is really in dire needs. In fact, I shared this number today at lunch. Out of Washington, the number is for America's currently our need of $324 billion just to get our national water infrastructure system and water quality where it should be. We're that far behind nationally. Indiana's is $20 billion that we need to be upgrading our water infrastructure. So you have these competing interests of what you're going to do with the resources that you have. Governor Pence, if you recall, really pushed hard for a 10% income tax reduction. Now, politically, that's an easy vote. You know, you want to give people a tax cut. But my thought was that, I mean, that's understandably, as I said today, that's a takeaway from the state coffers. On top of the death tax, we repealed the death tax, inheritance tax, which is a good thing. But all of that is revenue then that's going to have to be made up or lost someplace else. Doesn't mean it's not right to do that, but you have to think broader. I feel you have to think broader, bigger picture. How far do you go? What's the right mix of what you do? And it's not all about cuts. You have to try to grow and a combination to balance of both. So those are the things that are going to continue, I think, with where we are now. But now let's transition over on into where we are going to go with our new administration and the Governor Pence, which I tend to like. I don't know him well, but there's a feeling that we really would like for him to be more engaged than he has been, and it's been his first year. I mean, it's new to him, but unlike Governor Daniels, which had executive experience coming into the governor's office, Governor Pence is more, of course, he was a congressman for a number of years, and so he doesn't have that executive experience, in which the governor's office is really, that's the role. And so there's a little bit of that transition from what we were used to with Governor Daniels to now with Governor Pence. And so we're hoping that he'll engage a little bit more, get out and lead more. Again, he's got the House and the Senate and the governor's office. You would think things would just move right through. But there's apprehension of how far do we want to go with some of these policies. He has really pushed, and I'm a supporter of it, the vocational training, educational side of things, and the cost of higher education. You hear so oftentimes now in the papers about how much debt these kids are coming out of college with. It's just unbelievable. And they're really stepping back and trying to evaluate their return on that investment of the debt they're coming out of with hundreds of thousands of dollars or more for their education. And Governor Pence is really making an initiative to turn some focus and attention on the vocational trades in our state. Certainly, I think is one that needs the attention and support him with that. I know you said 10 minutes, but I'm going to wrap up here in just a few moments. Now, I mentioned our budget. It's a 2-year budget, $30 billion, and the priorities are set, for the most part, by the majority party. And that's the way it should be. That's what the people wanted. I shared this at lunch today as well, that I was the only Democrat, the only one on the minority party that voted for the budget, because in that world up there, everything's party. And it's their budget, we're against it, regardless. And I shared today the reasons why I voted for the budget, and I'll tell you tonight as well, and I think it's important for people to know that. I represent this district, about 75,000 people, okay, and my district in southeast Indiana, Clark County, is a lot different than maybe a district from up northern Indiana, Marion County, Indianapolis area. We all have our unique, I'm a border legislator with another state, a lot of unique differences there in terms of sales tax issues in comparison to another state if you're on the border. But I look at the issues that I vote on, knowing that my vote affects the entire state, of course, but it also, I have to vote what I think is in the best interest of my district and the people that I represent. And I try to look at it as, is it right for the district, for my area, regardless necessarily of the politics behind it. This budget that we passed had a number of positive issues or line items for this area of the state. And this is a 900-page document, and anything that big, you're going to have some good and some bad in it. There's going to be some things that you don't like at all, other parts of it that are good. But just real briefly, you've heard a lot about in the news about our airport here in Clark County and the future of the airport and what we're going to do with the airport, and how it should be managed, and the funding that they don't have. Working with Senator Grooms, the budget started on the House side. We were able to get a line item in the budget, the state budget, which raised a lot of eyebrows because normally you don't get a single line item specifically just for an airport, because most all these other counties, not all counties, but a lot of the counties have their own airports too. But we got a line item for Clark County's airport for $300,000 a year for Clark County's airport. That stayed in there through the process, and it can be leveraged for matching money as well. The Falls of the Ohio down here, the park, we have been desperately trying to upgrade the facilities there in terms of the exhibits. Danny Cummings and that group, they do a tremendous job down there. I know some of you are involved with the Rocks event they have and fundraisers. We were able to get $400,000 in the budget for their exhibits, which they are able now to take that money and match it with the Brown Foundation to have close to $1 million, which was a good thing that stayed in the budget. We worked hard on that. Schools and education, it's been cut pretty severely over the past few years. There was a slight increase. The average increase was under 2% for school corporations. Greater Clark received over 4% increase, which was phenomenal, frankly. That's still short of where we used to be, but it was a substantial improvement in this budget for the schools. The counties, we put budget money to revert back to the counties for the local roads and bridges. You can ask any of the county commissioners or county officials of how desperately they need money for the roads and bridges in the county to keep them upgraded. And keep in mind our growth that we're experiencing out towards Charlestown, and it's great. It's additional revenue and taxes, I guess, at some point, but just the other day we're working now because the roads, Bethany and Stacy Road, they're narrow, and the traffic and the growth for school buses and picking up the kids is really becoming dangerous. So it's going to put a pressure on addressing the width of the road out in those areas for school buses and emergency vehicles and things like that. So there's growth that's happening, but there is cost as well. But we were able to put money in the budget, state budget, for back to the counties for that. I mentioned that we had a reasonable reserve of about $1.3 billion, and I felt comfortable with that to keep that reserve in there. And it really comes down to just finding the right balance of your priorities. Now, there were some things that were cut out that I think were short-sighted, but we'll manage to get through that. So where are we going? I'll wrap up with this. It's a good question. I think there's still a big question mark about where are we going to go in terms of the new governor and the new leadership, the new administration. This year is when we start in January. It's a short session. We don't have a budget this year. It's going to be more probably just fine-tuning some legislation. One of the biggest surprises I got when I went to Indianapolis was how many bills we addressed or technical corrections from bills we passed before that we didn't realize the consequences were going to be involved. And so you have a lot of that. I think we'll see some of that as well. and streamlining government. I do chair the House Committee on Government Reform and Efficiency. The last thing I'll leave you with is that you're going to hear me talking a lot about, at least if you're